Welcome to our inaugural data quality download with Lisa and Mark. So we had such a great response at the end of 2016 with the webinar that Lisa and I did that we wanted to follow it up with something more that we could go a little bit deeper into the topics, really make sure that we were continuing the conversation for both Lisa and myself, but as well as for the industry, to really try to move some of these concepts and discussions forward to a point where we all feel empowered to really bring some of the actionable insights into our businesses and operationalize them. So what Lisa and I have decided to do is every couple of weeks we're going to try to do this podcast for all of you where we're going to call this our data quality download. So we're going to try to give all of you bite-sized chunks of information and insights relative to data quality, fraud detection, overall challenges and things that are facing the sampling industry. So we're going to do this. We're going to talk throughout the sessions around research responsibility, so making sure that we understand the who, the what, the where, the why as it relates to the responsibilities around data quality and how we all have a role. But we're also going to make sure that we spend a lot of time answering questions that Lisa and I get on a regular basis. And that'll actually be what we do in this first session, is we're going to make it a very kind of tangible follow-up to the webinar from December of 2016. We had so many great questions from the participants in that webinar that we unfortunately weren't able to answer all of them during the live session. So we wanted to take a few of those, many of them around bots, and talk about those a little bit today. And we're going to keep that same format from the webinar where we both present you information, but also just give you a little bit of a portal into some of the conversations that Lisa and I have on a regular basis as we battle and think about how to solve some of the challenges that face our industry. So Lisa, anything that I missed there in terms of kicking things off that you wanted to add?
No, that was a great introduction, Mark. I'm super excited about this upcoming podcast series. I think it's a really relevant topic area. You know, I was just at a conference last week, and quality came up throughout the conference, and so definitely a very relevant issue for us to be chatting about today. I'm excited.
Yeah, perfect. So today we said, Lisa, that we wanted to talk specifically a little bit about bots because we looked through the questions that folks had submitted, and we started to see these themes, and one of them was around bots. And so I think we've got, 4 or 5 specific questions around bots that we wanted to take people through today and then kind of do a little bit of back and forth between you and I and see if we even agree, right? I mean, I think that's the beauty of this, is that we don't even have to agree because that's part of the process here of investigation and thinking through these things. Sometimes there's the healthy debate, I guess, as we'll call it. So the first question that was submitted was, do these survey bots also fill in open-ended questions? Is there a way to screen responses in this case? Great question, right? And I think we both know that absolutely bots are capable of filling in open-ended questions. So that part is a yes. The second part of the question, I think, is where it gets a little bit muddier. Is there a way to screen responses in this case? Maybe, right? I don't know. I've seen cases where it's very obvious that maybe it's a bot,
right?
But it gets very challenging sometimes to truly distinguish a human response from a bot response, especially depending on what is the question, right? What's being asked. Anytime a yes or no response to an open-end is a legitimate response is going to make it far more difficult to discern human response from machine response. I think we're seeing a lot of evolution in the industry right now around, around technology as a whole, around chatbots. Really interesting, cool technology, but certainly making it more challenging to understand the differences between human response and artificial intelligence response, right? Because we really are starting to cross into a realm of AI and seeing it manifest within market research. And, a lot of cool things I think will come from the evolution of AI, but I think it will also start to present some challenges to us.
Absolutely. I think you hit the the nail on the head there. It's been really challenging. I mean, open ends, yes, to some extent they can, provide some insight into potential bot activity. But I think the important thing to think about, Mark, is to look at the survey responses in totality. You can't just look at one singular question and say, that's a good response or that's a bad response. It's not really a binary. It's not really a binary scenario. I mean, I've seen surveys, and I hate to say it, but I do see surveys today that are still 45, 50 minutes long, and they'll have an open end towards the end of the survey. And I've seen researchers say, well, that's not a good response, or that looks like a bot. But in reality, it's challenging to discern between what is a bot and what is a real human when you look at that response, because you could say to yourself, well, that response, isn't the highest quality, but am I sort of setting the respondent up for success by including a question that we know adds more burden to the respondent experience at the 45-minute mark, right? So I think it's, my piece of advice is never to sort of look at one question and make a determination on a respondent's quality or validity, but really look at the respondent throughout the life cycle of the study itself to make that determination.
I think, yeah, that's a great point. And that kind of, I think, leads us nicely into the second question that we had selected to talk about today is around the percentages of online sample per survey that, customers are throwing out, right? Because sometimes there's debate between the sample providers, the research firms, and how much sample should be rejected and on what criteria and those types of things. So, what do you see in your world, and what do you see as kind of averages and then reasonable and all those types of things?
Well, I think there's so much that feeds into the overall quality of the sample, and we covered a lot of that in our pretty extensive webinar back in December. But it's really about looking at quality throughout the entire life cycle, right? It's about how you source your sample, it's how you manage your sample, what the respondent experience looks like prior to sending the sample into the survey itself, and then all the technological solutions that you layer in. And so all of that has an influence. And, when we look at raw affiliate traffic out in the space, I'm not talking about panel sample, I'm talking about affiliate traffic, scrub rates can be as high as 30 or 40%. But when you're looking at an actual convenience panel, your scrub rate should be, below, I would say, 3%. There's always going to be noise to some extent in your survey. That's to be expected. That's why I always recommend to oversample on your targets, right? So oversample by maybe 10%, just so you have some leeway on the back end as you're reviewing responses. But, again, there's no right answer here. It really runs the gamut, and all of the things that we've talked about, all those quality mechanisms really play a very strong, vital role in the final outcome of your sample composition and ultimately how much you scrub from it.
Yeah, I'm sitting here wondering to myself, am I taking the cop-out path by saying there really is no average, there is no norm that you can expect in terms of what you should scrub out? Because we run a lot of free trials with customers on some of our tools that are meant to help give you the data to be able to understand this stuff. And, it's all over the map in terms of, what people see, because there's so many different sample sources out there. There's so many different kind of blends of sampling methodologies and things being used. And so it really is hard, in my opinion, to say, here's what I should expect to have to clean out. And as a result of that, I can expect to oversample by X and be okay. I don't know. It's just every survey is so different in terms of, what you see from this stuff, that it is that kind of constant vigilance that has to be applied in order to really make sure that, your data is going to be good and you can have confidence in the insights that, your customers are going to use and their customers are going to use and those types of things. So, yeah, maybe I'm still just going to take them. Maybe it's not a cop-out. Maybe it is. I don't know. That's where I'm gonna go that path either way, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's challenging to sort of say this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It's just, unfortunately, not that type of environment. There's so many permutations of fraud and online data quality issues that we see in our industry, and so you have to take a very layered approach. And that kind of leads me into the next question. We had one attendant say, these bots wouldn't be able to pass the speeder test, right?
Great
speed
question.
tests are great. Yeah, speed tests are great, but it's just one solution of many. What are your thoughts on speed tests, Mark?
I like them when they're done correctly. I see them applied in what I would call incorrectly a lot of times, though, where people are looking at kind of total time for the survey and those types of things, as opposed to getting really granular with their speed and understanding, less about the holistic amount of time spent in the survey. And rather, I want people to look at the amount of time spent on, each page, each question, each activity within the survey, those types of things, because I think that, to me, is where you have more of an opportunity to differentiate from the bots from the human traffic at a speed test kind of level. The bot that we showed, the little clip that we had in the webinar, probably would fail a speed test because of the way that bot was designed. But I think what we're seeing is these quote-unquote bot developers, bot operators are getting a little more sophisticated, right? And they're building in pauses into their bots and the programming logic that sits behind those bots and those types of things. So there's some cool things that are, kind of in the R&D out there around the development of paradata. So there's the idea of most people are familiar with metadata, less familiar with paradata. But this ability to really understand what's happening in terms of that user's interaction with the page. Because oftentimes the bots interact with the page in a different way than a human would. And if you can do some things behind the scenes to actually kind of consume and understand that behavior and what they did to interact with the page, you can get some kind of directional clues as to whether or not this may not be a human type of thing, even if they look good on the speed test, because they've got some of those kind of, human mimicking types of pauses built into it and those types of things. But I think we're at the early phases of that.
That's a great point, though, Mark, is I think early on when we saw sort of an increase in online fraud and surveys, bots would finish the surveys first. Their responses looked super obvious in terms of programmatic responses. But things are maturing, right? They're getting more sophisticated, and so bots are actually mimicking what a human would do and how long they would take to fulfill a survey, and even the responses are pretty variable as well. So it's not always super obvious. And I think that sort of leads us to the remaining questions that we had, because I know we're wanting to keep these short and sweet. Are there other tests that you've seen, Mark, throughout the survey that can be really helpful in identifying bot activity that you think would be important to mention here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thought, like a good line of thinking that people are doing relative to, hey, if I put halfway through my survey a question that's, prompts the user to specifically click the number 5, on a 10-point scale, right, as a way of kind of validating that the question is being read, the question is being consumed. There's now a contextuality between the response and the question that was asked. And that's good. My issue with it, I think, is that kind of by that very nature of prompting and forcing a respondent to click a specific answer on the 1 to 10 scale, the math there says that that's a 10% chance of getting it right, even if you're a bot. Am I comfortable with that, right? That's the question I find myself, that I'm kind of asking myself, right, is if I was the researcher there, I was the business that was making a decision based on that data, am I comfortable with the fact that there was a 10% chance of a bot getting through that? I don't think so. I don't love that, right? I don't think it's, as a component of my overall techniques, I think it's okay, but I certainly am not comfortable with it as a kind of quote-unquote silver bullet, right? Just because I'm adamant, and I think you and I agree on this, but I don't agree that there is any kind of silver bullet type of check or validation thing that you can do out there. And so I don't mind it, I guess, for people if they're incorporating it, But if they become reliant on it, that's when I start to worry.
Right. I think you can never get complacent and say, I've got this whole quality thing solved. It's a very dynamic, very evolving challenge for the industry. It's getting increasingly sophisticated, and so you have to have lots and lots of layers, and you have to acknowledge that this happens in our space. And so you have to be open about talking about it, and I think, that's something that you and I have been really passionate about through the years, and now leading into 2017 is let's keep the dialogue going. Let's talk about what we're seeing in the space so that we can be really proactive and get in front of this issue. Putting our head in the sand does not help anyone, right? And so, there is no magic bullet, and I think, there's a wide variety of different kind of trap questions that you can use. Some of them, I believe, are really overzealous and are taking out good respondents, and some are too simple and are letting bots ravage them. So there's a fine balance there. I think I'm a big proponent of doing internal testing and R&R. We've done quite a bit here at Innovate to figure out what the best approach is. And it's not the same approach for every survey, as you mentioned earlier. It's something that we have different scenarios that we use for different situations that we run into or recommendations that we make to our clients.
Absolutely.
With that, I want you, Mark, to share with the listeners about an upcoming project that we're going to be.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about this kind of collaborative research on research project that is bringing together a lot of companies from around the industry that are forward-thinking around, fighting fraud in the industry, moving the industry forward in a positive way. And so it's this initiative that's being called the Data Quality Genome Project. So the DQGP, because we have to have an acronym. It wouldn't be part of the market research industry without an acronym. Right? I don't think we could operate. Yeah. Would just be so confused. They're like, wait, what do I call it? But I think the goals of the Data Quality Genome Project are really, really important. And, one is determining the correlation between fraud markers and resulting response quality. So really kind of identifying and mapping the strength of correlation between different checks that are being done to determine if something is fraudulent or good quality, those types of things. Key combinations that improve that strength of correlation. And then investigating the presence of new or additional fraud markers, quality checks that can be observed or discovered by backtracing poor quality responses. I think that's really cool, is this idea of a massive data collection effort that can isolate what is manually, through human review, determined to be a poor quality response, and then kind of backtracing the why was that a bad quality response. Are there things that we can observe and then, create these kind of predictive checks and algorithms where we can move the industry forward to say we don't have to spend as much time evaluating responses anymore, because we've moved ourselves to that predictive space that says, hey, when we see these types of fraud markers or, kind of quality checks, when they're failed immediately up front, we know that the resulting response is going to be poor, so we shouldn't even bother collecting it. So I think it's going to be really fun and really interesting. We're going to get geeky on it, right? This is going to be our version of the white lab coats and the goggles and the beakers with all kinds of different solutions and things in them. But it's going to be this ongoing initiative that I hope the industry is going to get excited about and want to see what the initial group is working on, and then kind of maybe participate right alongside with us.
I'm super excited. I know, myself and the whole team at Innovate are really excited to be one of the participants in this project. I mean, the predictive elements are game-changing. Instead of being reactive and looking at the data on the back end of fielding, you're actually going to have fraud markers that give you peace of mind because speed wins in this space. It's all about collecting your data, getting out of field, getting those insights, and helping your clients make decisions on really important, business problems and questions. And so if we can rely on these predictive elements rather than human review on the back end, that's a huge time savings. And it really helps move our industry forward. So I thank you, Mark, for leading the effort on that. We're super excited to participate. And this has been great. I think we can call this first podcast a wrap, and appreciate your time. And I look forward to the next session, friend. It's been fun.
You as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think this will be fun. So that is your data quality download for today, folks. So thank you for everybody for listening. And, hopefully this will be something that we can continue the dialogue with everybody. We look forward to diving into the issues with everybody as the year progresses.